Well, wood and color collide in organic and vibrant ways here at the Mennonite Heritage Center Gallery at Canadian Mennonite University. They collide in an exhibit called Seeing, works of natural wood and, as I mentioned, the vibrant color, all curated by Victor Klassen, who sits beside me here in the gallery. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Well, thank you for the interview.
Of course. So there's something of a progression, and it's mentioned in your artist statement as well, going from wood and making your way towards color. What was that progression like for you, and then how does it kind of converge together in Seeing?
Well, my initial impetus in creation came from wood and wood sculpture, and I did that for years. And I also started painting, just for the enjoyment of it. And I guess at one point, I thought, well, when I'm too old to do sculpture, I can still paint. So, but I have found that I can still do sculpture too. But I did start enjoying painting, and I had the opportunity to take a 2-year course with a Mexican colorist artist who was quite well known in Mexico, and he and also I had my brother-in-law. One of my brother-in-laws in Mexico is an artist, and then I had a very good friend who was a painter, Colombian, who had studied. I guess he got a scholarship at 17 years old to go to Florence, and so he was.
Wow.
And these were all people that who were well established in their field, and they encouraged me. And so I like doing it. Though I should say, in my first show, I had 18 sculptures and 18 paintings.
Oh.
But there was a well-known Mexican artist there, and I met her at the party after the after party, and she liked my sculpture, and I asked her, what about my paintings? And she said, were there paintings?
Huh. So people are maybe interacting with the different elements of your
Yeah, I think my sculpture
output.
was much more developed than my painting at that time. I just kept on painting because I liked it.
Well, as you've been presenting your works here at the Mennonite Heritage Center Gallery in Seeing, what are you finding from people who are interacting with your work about which elements they are responding to more?
Well, there are definitely more to the paintings because there's more of them, but the color, I guess, is what, and the depth perceptions is what I'm finding people are relating to.
Okay. As people can see in the video, right beside Victor is an example of the kind of wood that he uses, and it's striking in its rawness that you are able to see the wood that's ostensibly lying on the ground, or maybe you even cut it down, and you are then able to conform it to your artistic need. What is that process like for you to find your raw materials? Is it as simple as walking along and finding a stick on the path and saying, "Wow, you know what that would be good in my current project," or is there something more to that?
Well, I was in Toronto and living in a very, I was confused, and I wouldn't have admitted it at that time, but I probably had mental issues, and I resolved them by going to deep into the forest underneath a bridge that masked the noise, and just lay down on the trunk of a tree and screamed a lot. And in some ways, I developed. For me, it was real at the time. A conversation with the forest, and that conversation I have now extended to make it a little more objective, I guess you could say. And for instance, these pieces, the birch bark came. I was thinking, well, I'll do part of my work in AI. There's a lot of AI painting being done, and I'll just try it out. and I was walking through the forest, and and the forest said, "Well, look, we've been doing intelligent projections for millions of years. Maybe you want to look at some of the things we do." So then I start seeing. Well, I'd seen them before, but the birch bark on the floor, forest floor, and I started gathering them up, and that's how that came about.
Okay.
And then gradually, at first I was very tenuous about how much to interfere with what I was seeing, because that was just beautiful in itself. And gradually I gained some confidence and started playing with it and interacting with it, and creating a work that is a combination of the forest and its deep beauty and my own representations such as they are.
So much to break down even within all of that. But another element of that artist statement that you shared alongside of seeing is the balance between that sort of outward objective, you use that word for representation of your relationship in art, and that balance of meditation. How has that meditation, that conversation with the forest changed for you over the years as your artistic output has so changed?
Yeah, well, meditation organized my perceptions, my subconsciousness, and it did a lot of work in terms of my self-esteem. It created a balanced self-esteem and more of a greater understanding that things that work well because you are open to benign spirits or forces, and you work with whatever you're experiencing at the time. And it's not so much your ego as it is your vulnerability that creates the substance of your effort.
That vulnerability that you mentioned too is maybe something that was a part of your career earlier in your life, as well as growing up in a Mennonite sort of a faith. To be able to express yourself through art was maybe not always the most encouraged or welcome sort of practice for that prayer or meditation. Maybe you can describe a little bit about what that dynamic, that relationship was like, and how maybe your views on that evolved.
Well, yeah, in our home where there was the visual arts were not given any importance. If there was an artistic strain, it was always in music, and I never even explored any visual tendencies in my youth. A little bit. I remember doing a little bit of drawings. But once I did start doing it, my family and my parents were very supportive. There was no, there was a recognition that, I think the Mennonites had a point about images. I mean, the images had been used in a corrupt and defrauding way, and used as a source of income, and so they denied images completely. And I think there is always a need to be question imagery, because it can create illusions, and it does create illusions, and art is essentially an illusion. Hopefully it's an illusion that does help us to see more clearly in the end.
How has this art and everything that you have gone through in its creation alongside the forest, how has this helped you to see more clearly in your life and in your spiritual practice?
Well, yeah, that's going into, much of the experience for me is very mystical, where it's like coloring by number, except a little more. A lot of the work I do, I'm just transcribing what I see in the material, whether it's paper or wood. And then I try to dredge up something from my subconscious, and then I just bring it out, what I see. And what I see is probably different than somebody else would see. And that's why I would like people to just take on the process of seeing and seeing it in their own way.
Another part of the process within seeing here is a video installment that is actually just over on the other side of the wall. What does that add to the experience of seeing alongside the paintings and the sculptures that are part of the exhibition?
Well, that idea was put up by a nephew of mine who had been to my place, and where I live in Mexico, I've built a number of houses and a number of rooms, and they have a lot of, my artistic interests and my, I express myself a lot in my building, and so it's an example which we couldn't bring here because it's. But of the work that I do in sculptural houses and things like that. At one point, I reached the point where I had the land. And my first house I built more or less traditionally, and then I realized I'm a sculptor. I can do what I want. So I just started playing, and it worked out pretty well.
As you continue along in your creative journey, what do you think that seeing this culmination of your works has allowed you to create? And maybe what has this process allowed you to say or to converse with the forest about? I guess a shorter way to put that is, what kind of conversations with the forest are you now able to have, having now created seeing?
Well, I mean, I hope it's going to be a continuing process. I feel I'm at the transition pace where my understanding of reality from seeing will be more deep and more perceptive. I don't know if you're familiar with the works of Remedios Varo. She's a surrealist painter from Spain, but she spent her last years in Mexico, and her work she did in Mexico, and its surrealism is been defined as something that is not a true representation, but it's something that seems to be alive, and she's very good at that.
Sure.
So, and she really penetrates into the depth of seeing
Wow.
in a way that goes much beyond what I've done. And that's, in a way, I guess what I'm, if I have any direction or aim in my life, it would be to get that to that level of seeing, myself.
Sure.
Yeah.
To dive that deep into the mystical sort of realm of the natural world.
Yeah,
I think
that's right.
it is striking as I walk around this exhibition that I kept coming back to that sort of adjective, mystical. And I think that is the experience that many viewers will have for seeing. We'll have more information at our website, classic107.com, and the Classic 107 app to make sure that you don't miss this exhibition. Victor, it's been wonderful to hear about these works with you, and thank you so much for sharing so much of them and yourself with us on Classic 107.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.